On Friday, September 5th, 2003, Big Thunder Mountain at the Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California was operating normally. Train number 2 was dispatched from the station and proceeded through the first part of the layout without any issues. As the train rounded a right turn, the front wheel assembly on the decorative locomotive car shifted further to the left than it was designed to. The other wheel assembly on the right side then lost contact with the track and fell downwards into a cross tie. The train proceeded into a small tunnel where the detached wheel assembly caused the decorative locomotive to be pushed upwards. The first passenger car then slammed into the back of the locomotive and killed a rider who was seated in the first row of the car, as well as injuring 10 others. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad's safety system stopped the ride immediately after detecting multiple issues around the first safety brake zone, and the ride was shut down for investigation. The investigation into what caused the accident began immediately. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was designed and manufactured by the Walt Disney World Company and officially opened to the public on September 2, 1979. The ride was well received during its opening, and Disney built 3 other versions at their other parks. Disneyland knew the ride would be popular with their guests, so to meet the demand, the ride was built to operate with a maximum of 5 trains at a time. This is accomplished through the ride's unique block system, which has multiple methods to stop a train throughout the layout. For more information on block zones, please see this video. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is unique in that it features safety brakes in unique places that are used in emergency situations to allow for 5 train operations. One of those unique places is Safety Brake 1, which is located in the tunnel before the second lift hill, where the train goes up a steep incline, the location of the accident. The trains consist of 5 passenger cars with 3 rows in each car and 1 decorative locomotive car that the passengers cannot ride in at the front of the train. Each train also has a unique name that coincides with its number. At the time of the accident, the ride's wheel assemblies were similar to most other modern roller coasters, with one major difference. The front of the locomotive used larger, more decorative road wheels rather than the smaller road wheels used on the rest of the train. Road wheels are the wheels that ride on top of a roller coaster's track. These wheels are accompanied by guide wheels, which are angled at the side of the track to help stabilize the train when it maneuvers through turns. On Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, each wheel assembly has 2 guide wheels. The ride and most modern roller coasters also feature upstop wheels, which are placed underneath the track rails to keep the train on track during moments of negative G-force. The wheel assemblies are secured to the train using 2 floating axles on the front and rear of the car. Big Thunder Mountain's guide and upstop wheel assembly is secured onto the floating axle using 2 retaining bolts. In the event that these bolts are to fail, there's also a safety wire that secures the guide and upstop wheel assembly to the train. Big Thunder Mountain operates year-round, and for much of that time it's operating with 4 or even 5 trains at a time. With little downtime, it takes a significant amount of maintenance to keep the ride operating safely and reliably all year long. One of the procedures that Disneyland maintenance used to ensure that trains were inspected was the yellow and green tag procedure. It would work with the color of each tag to identify whether or not maintenance work was completed and the train was inspected. A green tag would identify that all preventative maintenance work had been completed and the ride vehicle was safe to re-enter service. The green tags were only valid for 72 hours at a time, and once the 72-hour period had passed, the vehicle needed to be re-inspected. The yellow tag indicated that the ride vehicle needed to be taken out of service so preventative maintenance could be performed. The tag was required to remain on the ride vehicle until preventative maintenance had been completed, and a green tag was then placed on it to allow it to re-enter service. Disneyland used both internal and external maintenance personnel to ensure the rides were properly maintained and inspected, similar to other amusement parks at the time. On Tuesday, September 2nd, train number 2 was undergoing preventative maintenance. The guide and upstop wheels were replaced on the locomotive car. The ride mechanic placed a yellow tag on the train, which would have normally indicated that it was not ready to re-enter service. Following the accident, investigators interviewed multiple ride mechanics and discovered that many of them had a poor understanding of the yellow and green tag procedure, and many could not even explain it. Train number 2 was never re-inspected and was given a green tag. It then re-entered service even though its wheel assembly was not tightened in accordance with Disneyland specifications. The wheel assembly was also missing its safety wire. Train number 2 was signed off on September 5th, the day of the accident, by a different ride mechanic, stating it was safe to operate. Disneyland maintenance procedures at the time allowed one mechanic to sign off for someone else's work. The investigation later found that the team responsible for overseeing the maintenance of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad prior to the accident did not always ensure that paperwork and other administrative tasks were followed and completed properly and on time. Disneyland had even created an auditing procedure prior to the accident to ensure that proper checks were completed prior to being signed off, but there was no documentation that this was ever completed at Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. On the morning of Friday, September 5th, 2003, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was inspected and signed off by ride maintenance personnel. The ride would open for the day with 2 trains in operation. The ride was operating normally until around 10:30 a.m. when train number 2 was added to the ride to increase its capacity, bringing the total number of trains up to 3. Train number 2 was immediately loaded with park guests and completed 12 cycles normally. While the train was cycling, it was making strange noises as it traveled through the ride course. During one of those 12 cycles, one of the 2 retaining bolts that secured the guide and upstop wheel assembly to the floating axle on the left side of the decorative locomotive car detached itself from the train. As the train was nearing the station during its 12th cycle, the other retaining bolt detached from the train and caused the guide and upstop wheel assembly on the left side of the decorative locomotive to fall to the ground. This was due to the backup safety wire not being installed to catch the assembly. The train was unloaded and a new group of 24 riders boarded the train, unaware of the partially missing wheel assembly underneath them. The operators checked and dispatched the train for its 13th cycle of the day around 11:17 a.m. Shortly after the train was dispatched, the decision was made to remove the train from operation due to the strange noises it was making. Train number 2 proceeded through the first part of the layout without any major issues. As the train rounded a right turn, the decorative locomotive car shifted further to the left than it was designed to due to a lack of a stabilizing guide and upstop wheel on the left side. This caused the right guide and upstop wheel assembly to drop off the track. The train then proceeded into a small uphill tunnel with the floating axle detached from the track. It collided with the first safety brake on brake zone 1 and eventually wedged itself between the track's cross ties. The force of the train and the angle at which the track went uphill caused the floating axle on the back of the decorative locomotive car to be pushed upwards into the roof of the tunnel. The front of the car, which was now pushed downwards, sheared off a safety brake. The force of the locomotive car being thrown upward caused the tow bar between the locomotive and the first passenger car to break. This allowed the first passenger car to slam into the decorative locomotive, killing one of the 2 riders in the first row. The impact of the collision was so strong that the rear floating axle of the third car also derailed and impacted one of the ride's safety brakes. Big Thunder Mountain's control system detected multiple issues and e-stopped the ride after noticing the train was out of sequence. As the train lost momentum, it rolled backwards down the tunnel until it was caught by the safety brakes, where it came to a full stop. The locomotive, which was no longer attached to the rest of the train, rested at the top of the tunnel, separated from the rest of the passenger cars. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was shut down and the investigation into what caused the accident began. The investigation would ultimately determine that the accident was caused by a mechanical failure related to the preventative maintenance train number 2 had received a few days before the accident occurred. In addition, some of the maintenance and operational procedures were found to be inadequate and not being carried out as intended. The California Occupational Safety and Health Division required Disneyland to complete 4 different corrective action specifications before they could reopen Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. The first corrective action required Disneyland to retrain all outside mechanics, park-employed mechanics, and maintenance managers that were assigned to work on Big Thunder Mountain around the time of the accident. This was after finding that many of them were unfamiliar with some of the procedures. This retraining was required to be supervised by the Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Secondly, new operational procedures were developed, as, at the time of the accident, there was no procedure for what to do if an unusual noise was noticed. These operational procedures had to be implemented at all of Disneyland's rides and attractions. The third change introduced was that Disneyland would now be required to complete at least 1 empty test cycle on all ride units before carrying riders for the day or after repairs. This standard was later adopted by ASTM and is now standard procedure at all US parks. Finally, previous maintenance policies allowed for 1 mechanic to sign off for another mechanic's work. This would be prohibited following the accident, and only the mechanic who completed the work would be able to sign off on it. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad remained closed until Disneyland completed these corrective actions. After 6 months, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad reopened on March 11, 2004. Upon its reopening, park guests noticed a few changes made to the ride. Most notably, they noticed that the locomotive only had 1 front wheel rather than 2, and more brakes and sensors were also noticed on the track layout. The family of the rider who was killed in the accident filed a lawsuit against Disneyland stating that they failed to properly train ride operators and significantly cut costs on ride maintenance. 2 other lawsuits were filed by the other rider in the first row who suffered serious injuries and multiple other people who were injured while on board. Disney settled all 3 lawsuits for an undisclosed amount and accepted liability for causing the accident. Since the accident, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Disneyland has operated without any other serious incidents. The ride continues to safely provide a fun experience for millions of riders each and every year. Operational and maintenance procedures at Disneyland and other parks around the industry were changed and modified as a result of this accident. Today, the legacy of this accident lives on and is used as a case study for how simple oversights in maintenance and operations can lead to serious accidents. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.